If a city could talk, Hanoi would tell you one heck of a story. This city is the product of 1,000 years of history. And if you know where to look, that history is still visible today.
In this video, we're going to be looking at a lot of historical maps, but not just for a sense of Hanoi's history. This can actually help you get around. Because when you look at Hanoi through the centuries, what's remarkable isn't how much the city's changed, but how much it's remained exactly the same. Let's start with context. Northern Vietnam is mostly mountainous, but the Red River comes down from China and fans out into a low, wet plain known as the Red River Delta. This area has seen many of Vietnam's most important events, such as in 938, General Ngo Nguyen defeated the Chinese at the Battle of the Bac Dang River, ending 1,000 years of Chinese rule. The first capital of independent Vietnam was Hoa Le, near today's Ninh Bình, and in the year 1010, Emperor Lý Thái Tổ moved the capital to Thăng Long, modern-day Hanoi. Hanoi's basic shape can be traced back to this original capital. But why did the emperor choose this locale in the first place? One reason stands out: water. Thăng Long was surrounded by rivers, lakes, and fertile land, perfect for agriculture. Swamps and marshlands made the city easily defensible. Access to trade routes along the Red River made commerce easier. And its location in the center of the delta allowed the emperor to more easily control the region. In his royal edict establishing the city, the emperor said the site was favorably situated with regard to mountains and river, large and flat, fields high and well exposed, the population protected against high water and flood. This protection from floods was especially important because even today, during the wet season, the Red River rises and floods surrounding lands. So, for thousands of years, people have been protecting their homes and crops by building dikes. And this is the first place where knowing something about Hanoi's historical relationship to water can help you get around. Surrounding Hanoi is a ring road called Đường Vành Đai, which is also sometimes called the Dike Road. And while it isn't built on the historic dikes, it generally follows the edge of the city's flood-prone areas, particularly on the east side. Water also shaped the city in other ways. This drawing from 1490 isn't exactly to scale, but you can begin to see the outlines of modern Hanoi. Here's the Red River, the center of the entire region. Here's Hồ Tây, or West Lake, Hanoi's largest lake. Here's Hoàn Kiếm Lake, which at the time was still connected to the Red River. The imperial capital was here, inside the city walls. Here's the Temple of Literature, which you can still visit today. But here's something very important that no longer exists, but was key to why Hanoi was founded on this site. At the time of its founding, and for centuries afterwards, Hanoi actually had two rivers. In addition to the Red River, there was the Tô Lịch River. So this river provided a direct route from the imperial citadel to the Red River, which was the key transportation route for the whole region. It was a perfect place to set up a market, and this market grew and grew, and eventually became one of the most important economic centers of the region. We know this market today as Hanoi's Old Quarter. The basic layout of the Old Quarter has been in place since the 14th or 15th century. Its most famous feature is something you probably already know. The streets are named after goods that were traditionally sold on them. This street used to sell baskets. Silver Street, Oil Street, wooden bowls, Chicken Street, drums, pipes, sails, as in boat sails. Roasted fish. Nong are the conical hats that you see all over Vietnam. Sugar Street. Herbal medicine. Sorry, not what you think it is. Cotton. This is what you were looking for. Hemp. So, centuries passed, empires changed, Europeans arrived, and the city grew. By 1831, this map shows Hanoi's core layout as you see it today. The imperial capital, Old Quarter, West Lake, Hoàn Kiếm Lake, Temple of Literature, and protective dikes to the east. Now, we still haven't talked about the French. One thing to note is that until the late 19th century, when the French took over administrative control of the city, Hanoi was filled with lakes and wetlands and still very much connected to the Tô Lịch and the Red Rivers. In fact,
Hanoi was very wet.
In this 1873 map, you see the imperial citadel and the old quarter and plenty of lakes, marshes, rice paddies, swamps. Unfortunately, by this point, many of these had become open sewers, and when the French took over, one of the first things they did was begin to fill them in. French occupation occurs in two waves. From 1873 to 1888, the priority was to take care of Hanoi's most urgent environmental problems. Then, from the 1890s, the city began to be modernized, following design ideas common in Europe at the time. This 1885 map is great. It shows the old quarter and how much water is still there, but the grid of streets below Hoan Kiem Lake, which would later become the French Quarter, has not yet been built. By 1891, you see a little less water and the beginning of a neat grid of streets below Hoan Kiem Lake. This was the original French Quarter, where most foreigners and a few well-to-do Vietnamese began to make their homes. At this time, you also see the formation of Rue Paul Bert, Hanoi's main commercial street, and today known as Trang Dien. 1902 is a big year. This is when the railways, Central Train Station, and Long Bien Bridge first opened, connecting Hanoi to the port city of Haiphong. By 1911, more waterways are filled in. This map also shows how the French divided the city administratively into 5 main zones: Citadel, Hoan Kiem, Chut Bac, Quartier Français or French Quarter, and Bay Mo, which means 7 rice paddies. And you'll never guess why they named it that. By 1929, the Old Quarter and most of central Hanoi have the shape we see today, with new developments pushing the borders of the city south and west.
So World War II brought Japanese occupation. And then from the 40s to the 70s, Vietnam was at war, first with the French, then with the Americans. Unfortunately, a lot of Hanoi's changes during this time had to do with repairing damage rather than building new things. But there were several significant developments at that time.
The 1950s brought new suburbs and communal apartment buildings known as khu thập thể. The 70s brought civic squares and public parks, such as Lenin Park and the former Bay Mo district and the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum. People flooded into the city in the 1990s, and in 2008, Hanoi annexed an entire province, and its population grew by 2.5 million people overnight. And there are tons of modern developments, such as Lotte Center and Times City.
This is all important, but I want to stay focused on the map. We've now learned something about how Hanoi was founded and how it's evolved. So let's see if we can use this understanding to help us get around.
Following the French defeat in 1954, Hanoi's districts were reconfigured as follows. The area around the imperial citadel became Ba Ding. Along with the ruins of the old imperial capital, this is where you'll find Hanoi's flag tower, Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum, one-pillar pagoda, and the presidential palace, along with other government buildings.
I find it fascinating that the center of political power in Vietnam, even today, remains exactly where the emperor put it 1,000 years ago.
The Old Quarter and eastern part of the French Quarter are both in the Hoan Kiem district, named after the lake which remains the spiritual center of the city. Additionally, the Old Quarter, Trang Dien Street, and the Opera House are key landmarks. Hai Ba Trung covers the southern part of the French Quarter and the eastern part of the old district of Bay Mo. Remember, it's mostly a grid, so you're unlikely to get lost here. Beautiful tree-lined streets and lots of great cafes and restaurants in this area. Dom Da encompasses the western part of Bay Mo and extends far into the west. Here's where you'll find the Temple of Literature and Hanoi's Central Train Station, the famous Train Street, and the further west you go, the more modern the city becomes. The area around Westlake has expanded a lot in the last 30 years and become a thriving residential zone known for its lotus fields, large expat community, and scenic lakeside views. Chut Bac, which was an independent district under the French, is now part of Ba Ding, but it remains a unique and charming neighborhood with great eateries and walks along the lake.
There's a lot we can't cover, like Long Bien and the areas to the west where the city keeps expanding. But here's the takeaway. Hanoi is a city of neighborhoods, each with its own character, its own vibe, and it's held together in a layout that hasn't changed in centuries. So whether you're navigating Hanoi's modern streets or wandering through the Old Quarter, you're stepping through layers of history. And knowing something about that history not only help you appreciate Hanoi, it'll actually help you get around.